It's that time again. That time again. Ooh, it's that time again. Time for Mondays in Middle Earth. Do we need a theme song? Just wrapped up with the Kindle on the bed, back behind me. It is time. We're diving into Chapter 7 of Book 4 of the Two Towers, Journey to the Crossroads. Now, before we get into this, don't forget that if this is your first time tuning in, like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. We've been doing this series now for several months. We went through The Hobbit, The Fellowship of the Ring, and now we're sort of getting towards the end of the Two Towers, which means that we're going to be getting into The Return of the King and then the Silmarillion. All of which is to better educate ourselves on things that we had forgotten from 20 years ago, and also to sort of get up to speed with all this crap they're doing with Rings of Power, which has been very entertaining, to say the least. There's a lot of previous episodes if you haven't watched those yet, so dive into those. And if you like what you see here today, don't forget, like all of these amazing people, you can support the channel in a few simple ways. First and foremost, on premieres like this, you can do super chats and stickers right down there in the chat window. There's a little chat button with a dollar sign. Pre-programmed amounts exist, but you could do your own for $2, $5, whatever you feel comfortable with. And then if you're watching this after the premiere, you can simply drop a super thanks down there on the button that says thanks and then pick an amount or use the pre-programmed amounts. And then above and beyond that, there's the membership option here for $2.99 a month, which is probably the easiest way for a lot of people because it's a monthly membership, and then you just re-up at the end of the month and keep going from there. And it's $3 a month, so it's a great way to say, "Here's a cup of coffee, Tim. We love what you do." All of those ways are great ways. Hopefully, you pick one of them. Beyond that point, let's dive into today's episode. Oh, and yeah, somewhere up in here, I gotta remember this. There will be a link to the series as a whole, so check those out. Go watch previous episodes. Chapter 7, Journey to the Crossroads. We are basically leaving the safety and comfort of Faramir's camp in this chapter. Now, apologies for that, my sinuses. Faramir is a very fair individual, no pun intended. And we are shown, in my mind, one of the greatest characters of the series in the previous couple of chapters. We also got a ton of lore dumps. This chapter, by comparison, is very quick and doesn't have a lot of what was going on before, but it's very quickly we're descending into the chaos of what is about to come for the next few chapters as we wind up this book. So they wake up to a breakfast with Faramir, who gives them a bunch of supplies and lets them know his scouts and watchers have all returned, and all of them report a strange thing, because there is nothing on the road and no sound of foot nor horn, no bowstring anywhere to be heard. Um, it says basically, a waiting silence broods above the nameless land, and Faramir does not know what this portends. Now, unless I'm mistaken, this is the timeline where basically all of the armies of Mordor are getting ready to march upon Minas Tirith, which is the Battle of Pelennor Fields, if I'm not mistaken, which is a little foretelling. I'm trying to remember that's going to be something that happens in Return of the King during the first part of that book before we go back to the journey of Frodo, Sam, and everybody else. So if I'm not mistaken, this is the timeline here that as this is happening, the orcs and all of the southern men and all of the armies of Mordor are preparing for their big march. So they're basically heading west at this point. So that's why there's nobody on the roads or anything like that. Or at least they're somewhere in that timeline. I know when you get into the Return of the King, Frodo and Sam have a moment where they meet up with orcs that are on their way out, I think. But it's been a long time since I've read, so I think that's where we're at in the timeline. I could be wrong on that. If I am wrong on that, somebody in the comments let me know below. For those who played the game Lord of the Rings Online, which I'm a huge fan of, it's my #1 MMORPG. It's what I built this channel upon. I still play the MMO every week on Tuesdays. There's a little lore drop here because the staves that Faramir's men give to Frodo and Sam, it says they are cut from a tree known as Lebethron. And they've been shortened down to hobbit size, but it says here that they have a virtue that has been set upon them of finding and returning, and Faramir hopes that this virtue will not wholly fail them under the shadows into which they must go. But it's a cool little lore nod into one of the types of wood that they provide you with in the MMORPG as a crafting resource, because you can make a lot of items out of Lebethron wood. I think it's like tier 4 or something, like level 40, I think, is when you get into Lebethron. Or maybe that's Black Ash, and Lebethron is level 40 to 50. I don't remember. It's been a while since I've been in that tier, but this is a really cool lore reference to the Lord of the Rings online MMORPG. Faramir mentions here that they're going to have to bind Gollum's eyes on the way out so that he can't detect the way and he squeals and squirms and clutches at Frodo when they come to bind him. And Frodo says, "If you're going to blindfold him, you need to blindfold all of us and cover my eyes first, so that he can see that no harm is meant." So even now, Frodo is attempting to prove to Smeagol that he does not wish him harm, and he's trying to fix the betrayal that he feels from the previous chapter where he gave Smeagol up and betrayed him, with his lie. And they get to the end, and there's a little short farewell, and they send him off. And as soon as the men of Faramir and Gondor are away, Gollum starts to complain about the cruel treatment he suffered. And Frodo basically tells him, "If you can only speak ill of those who showed you mercy, keep silent." And Gollum grumbles and growls, and "I was only joking." And he says, I'm always forgiving even nice masters' little tricksies. So he's making some very, sarcastic comments here about, "Oh, I'm always forgiving, even you, master, who tricked me with your lies." So definitely some rancor still on the heart of Gollum here about what just went down with Faramir, and that's something that's going to come out very soon. Foretelling, foreshadowing, spoiler alert. From here, basically the rest of this chapter, I would say 3/4 of this chapter is just grim, dark marching. And every night, Gollum pushes them harder and harder, and Sam is growing increasingly suspicious of Gollum at this point. He's not ever letting them get any sleep, and it's just constantly going, 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 and it just gets darker and darker and darker as they go until they eventually make it to the crossroads. And this is a very bad place to be because from here there's nowhere good to go. What's really interesting is when they get to the crossroads, mentioned in the title of the chapter, there's this really cool moment where it says the road to Osgiliath stretches out into the west, and it seemed to have a light coming down out of the west, and it shone upon Sam's face, and it said, "Beyond, sad Gondor was now overwhelmed by a shade," and it talks about the sea beyond and everything else, and it's basically the sunset. And it says, "This beam of light then falls upon a statue and a head that had been chopped off and lain in the grass, and the orcs had defaced the statue and everything else. But they found the ray of light comes and shines upon the head of the statue that is now laying in the grass." And it says, above the high stern forehead was a crown of silver and gold as plants and flowers. And Frodo mentions that, look, the crown here, it says basically evil cannot conquer forever. And then it says the brief glimpse was gone, and the sun dipped and vanished, and the black night fell. Now from here, things are only getting worse for these guys. This was also done very well in the film, I think, because they had a moment where the ray of light fell, and I think Sam mentions in the film, "Look, the king's got his crown again," and it's this brief moment. It's very important because this is the last, as I remember. I think there's only a couple chapters left, 2 or 3 chapters, because the next one is chapter 8. I think there's like 10 chapters, 11 chapters per book. I think we're getting very close to the end of the Two Towers. If I remember correctly, this is like the last glimmer of hope before things just go to shit completely. And it's this last moment of like the light of the west, the light of the men, the light of Gondor. Here's this statue of a Gondorian man that has fallen, and even though it's in darkness, it's been disfigured by orcs. The ray of light shows that the flowers are there, and evil can't exist forever. Look, even the flowers have come back. It is a glimpse of hope, and it's going to be very important that these characters carry that within them, within their hearts, because things from this point are going to get progressively in stages worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. It's very grim from here on out for Frodo and Sam, but obviously at the end of the day, we do know from having previously read the book and having watched the films that there is light at the end of the tunnel. It's just a ways off. So in the meantime, that's the end of this chapter. It was, leaves you on a very sour note. We had really, a few chapters of being with Faramir and having a reprieve from the darkness, and then now we're back in the thick of it, and Gollum leading them into the darkness. So, now that we're at the end, this is the point where I say, if you liked what you saw here today, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon, and support in all of the ways that we talked about at the beginning of the episode, including of going above and beyond to the Patreon page, where my wife and my brother and I are creating our own fantastical world. It's a book series. It's a point-and-click adventure game. And it's also 5th edition tabletop setting, which we stream every Sunday night. So if you like fantasy and you like good writing and everything else, not only can you support here on YouTube, you can also go over to the Patreon page and check all that stuff out. So hopefully we'll see you over there as well. Don't forget to join in the Discord, and I look forward to hearing your comments about this chapter down below. Thanks so much for your support, everybody. Until the next episode, happy reading.